one of my gardening memories was very much about rock gardening. Rock gardening was quite an important thing in the southeast of England in the 1960s, 1970s. And I remember when we moved to somewhat smaller, we downsized a bit to a house on a new development in Sevenoaks in Kent. I remember my father used to get these sort of lorry loads of old paving slabs from the council. And I bet you begin to think now, Noel's going to claim his dad invented crevice gardening. Now, he was boring. He laid them horizontally to make little low raised beds and then built a kind of conventional rock garden on top of that. But rock garden plants was very much the thing. And around us, there were some really good nurseries, like there was Ingerson's, who were in the middle of a forestry plantation, very near what is now that place where you can't get in for dinner. What am I talking about? Grave Tart, yeah. In the woods behind Grave Tart.
The home of William Robinson.
There was a nursery called Robinson's, kind of towards North Kent, who did a fantastic range of stuff. But what I was coming in on was very much the end of what had been an early 20th century obsession for many British and indeed many German gardeners, which was making rock gardens. We underestimate now what an enormously important part of horticulture this was and how much money was spent on these rock gardens. And they went into decline and decline and decline. Every now and again, I was aware of some different stuff, like going to Utrecht Botanic Gardens in Holland, seeing these incredible spheres made of paving slabs. My father could have done that if he had slightly more imagination and daring, planted with rock plants. And these are kind of, wow, let's use recycled materials. And then I was beginning to hear rumors of stuff coming out of the Czech Republic. And of course, the Czech Republic, as I've banged on about before, the Czechs have been extraordinary innovators in horticulture for a very long time. So I'm beginning to see pictures of these very sort of naturalistic rock gardens that are quite unlike anything that had gone before. So it's time to introduce Kenton Seth and Paul Spriggs, who are at the moment just back from building a huge new project somewhere in the Seattle area. And you've just published a book with Alan Mumford at Filbert Press. So tonight we're celebrating the publication of The Crevice Garden. This is the new face of rock gardening. Rock gardening will no longer elicit a yawn because this is the future. So over to you guys.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, Noel. Share the screen.
Yeah, let's fire it up.
Okay. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, you just need to press play. Yep, perfect.
There we go. Okay. Well, first of all, I just want to thank everybody for coming and to tell you how honored we are to be here, to be given this opportunity to spread the word of our true passion and to spread the word of crevice gardening. So crevice gardening is, as Noel just said, pretty much the kind of cutting edge of rock gardening of today. You can't really go anywhere in rock gardening circles without people talking and getting excited about crevice gardening. And we're hoping that through the publication of our book and spreading the style around, it'll create somewhat of a renaissance in rock gardening. So thank you everybody for coming, and let's just get started. So I'm going to start by introducing my partner in crime and co-author, Kenton Seth, who I had the great, I believe it was fate that actually brought us together over 10 years ago. The two of us are, like I said, partners in crime. We're mirror images of one another when it comes to our interests in rock gardening. And in the last 10 years or so, we have worked together on a number of projects and supported one another. And a few years ago, we decided to write a book. And little did we know when we embarked on it, what a journey it would be. The journey is now over. Thanks to Anna and multiple connections, this book is going to be released this month in the UK and in a couple of months in the United States. And I can tell you, we could not be happier with it. It is exactly the vision that we had from the beginning. Anna did not in any way make us change what we wanted. And so
Better.
thank you. Well, if anything, well, of course, it's better than we expected it to be, thanks to the professionalism of everyone at Filbert Press. It was an absolutely incredible experience. So here's a garden this is the first garden that Kenton and I worked on together down in basically Denver, Colorado. This is one of our first largest installations. I believe it was the biggest in the world when we built it. Yeah, for a little bit there, right? And so we've collaborated together. Here's that same garden a few years. Actually, this is just last year. So you can see it's a very natural style. The whole idea is to emulate plants from extreme places and bring them up close to viewing and in this new and interesting style.
A little green paintbrush.
So yeah. So we're going to put a little sneak preview of a spread in the book here. As you can see, it's very colorful, very modern, and very edgy. And like as we say, we're hoping to bring a lot of new people into the fold with this publication. We also have a Crevice Garden Facebook page. If anybody wants to join Modern Crevice Gardens, this is an old screenshot. We're almost up to 5,000 members now. And you'll see all different styles of crevice gardens and, of course, learn and have interesting conversations through these great Facebook pages. And one more little plug, of course, we're both on Instagram at Paul Spriggs Rock Gardener, and Kenton is at Plant for the Apocalypse on Instagram. So again, thanks everybody for having us. Now, rock gardening, the main influence of rock gardening is extreme places. We spend a lot of time in these types of places, plant hunting and looking for little gems. And in this photograph, which is in the Coast Ranges of British Columbia, it looks like a pretty desperate and lifeless place. But when you get looking more closely, you will find that it is far from a lifeless place. And these are the types of places that we go to look for the types of plants that we like to grow in the crevice garden. Now, like I said, extreme places come in many forms. The mountains are not the only harsh environment on the earth. There's also deserts. There's coastal bluffs, steppes where it's extremely cold or extremely hot. And often these plants have had to adapt to these conditions by staying small, by staying out of the elements. And these are the types of plants we're looking for. The general rule in crevice gardens is, maybe no more than 15 centimeters with a flower on it. Now, of course, there's exceptions to that. A large garden with large rocks can feature larger plants without question. But a lot of these gardens are built in small situations. As you can see in this photograph, the front door of a house. This is only about 2 by 2 feet, but it's still enough to put a nice little demonstration and grow all these interesting plants from all over the world. Now, there are dwarf forms of so many garden plants. Most people know about columbines. Now, columbines are the granny's bonnets and the border perennials of the cottage garden. But did you know that there's a columbine that's only 2 inches tall with the flower that's the same size as a normal sized columbine? And when I first saw this plant, I wanted a plant raffle, and it's just been with me all these years, and it charms me every time it pokes out of the ground. Can you imagine that? A 2-inch high columbine, absolutely gorgeous one. This one, Aquilegia flabellata nana from Japan. So here's a little selection of some of the plants we like to grow. Everybody knows about the carnations or the dianthus. Well, there's also miniature dianthus as well. This is Dianthus Erinaceus from Eastern Europe, one of the most beautiful of the bun-forming dianthus. Of course, no modern crevice garden would be complete without the dwarf daphnes. And of course, daphnes as well have their bigger forms. But there's a myriad of selections from the wild and hybrids of the most choice dwarfs that you could possibly imagine. And if you want to be enchanted by a plant, and of course by their heady aroma, you must have daphnes in your garden. You may look to the Czechs for some help on that, because they are really some of the most forward-thinking people when it comes to daphnes. And so a nice plant that we wouldn't be without in our gardens, Louisiopsis Tweediai, well related to Louisia, native to eastern Washington state. This is sometimes referred to as the queen of the rock garden. And as you can see by this photograph, you can see why that might be so. It is really one of our most gorgeous alpines, and coincidentally, it grows about a 2-hour drive from here in nature. Yeah, so we'll have to go see it in a couple months when it's blooming. Everybody knows about bluebells or campanulas. Well, here's something in the Campanulaceae, or the Campanula family. Adrianthus. These are Eastern European miniature bluebell type things. I like to refer to them as the classy campanulas. As you can see, there's really some of the most gorgeous dwarf campanulas that you could ever get your hands on.
So tiny.
And they're
Wonderful.
extremely small. I don't know of any of them that get much more than maybe 4 inches tall, and they're absolutely gorgeous. I think this is the last one I'm going to show because I'm quite proud of it because it's native to the coastal bluffs right near my house. Sedum spatulifolium, this rock stone crop. As you can see here, this is a red variant that's an absolutely gorgeous thing.
Superb form, unusually good.
Yes, and I was actually asked by a native plant society, what's the best native plant for the rock garden? And this is the one I chose for so many reasons. It looks like this all year long. Add to that a beautiful yellow flower. Add to that it's deer resistant, it's drought tolerant, it's dwarf. I mean, it's got everything going for it that you could ever want in a rock plant. And isn't it such a gorgeous thing? And oh, here we go, acantholemon. I must talk about acantholemon. I don't know, apparently there's larger shrubby versions of these plants, but as a rock gardener, I'm not too interested in those. But this is my current favorite genus. It's really one of the most beautiful bun-forming plants. The common name is prickly thrift because they look a lot like armerias or sea thrifts, except they have a little bit of a prickliness to them. And as you can see, this species here, Trojanum from Turkey, is one that where the flowers stay nice and close to the bun. And again, it's a giver. After it blooms, it's got beautiful bracts. It's evergreen all through the winter, at least in my climate. And you know, it just really pays the rent 12 months of the year. So as you can see, dwarfs is what we want. But what is a crevice garden? How do you define a crevice garden? Well, it's a type of rock garden, but it's a new type of rock garden. Now, people have always been growing plants in crevices, rock gardeners. If you go back in the AGS journals, you'll see examples, and William, all the original rock gardeners, they knew the advantages of the crevices. But it's only been in recent decades that it's been turned into an art form and a style into itself, where the garden is made completely of crevices. So there has been a lot of innovation starting around the late 70s or early 80s, particularly out of the Czech Republic. Now, there's a big, long story here that we don't have time to delve into, but Mr. Joseph Halda on the top right here is a man that we had the great privilege to visit in Eastern Czech Republic. He is basically credited as the father of the crevice garden. He innovated the style, and then our mentors, Zdeněk Zvolanek and Wojciech Holubek, took those styles with subtle modifications and really ran with it. Now, all these Czechs speak English as well, and so they were all able to come to North America, and they had a mission to spread the word of this style. So they would come to North America, build gardens, give talks, workshops, demonstrations, and that's how we were linked into it. In fact, Zdeněk Zvolanek, he lived in my town. He was a member of my rock garden club. And it was like kind of a right place at the right time situation. And since I had it in my genes that this was a really cool thing to do, we hit it off quite well. So like I said, there's a big story here, but it's really the Czechs that have brought crevice gardening to the world. Now, in terms of our inspiration from a design point of view, where do we look for this? Well, rock gardens are typically very natural. And if you look around nature, you'll often see examples of stratified stone. So this is stone that's been laying down. So sandstones and mudstones and limestones, and then over millions and billions of years have been tilted by tectonic forces to create these incredibly dramatic features that you'll see when you're out hiking. Here's two examples just from Vancouver Island, two very different types of rock. The one on the left is a schist, and the one on the right is a limestone. And these are the types of formations you see in nature, as you can see, where we are able to emulate and create the exact kind of growing conditions that these plants we like to grow are happy in. And now again, it's a whole other talk to talk about construction and design, and we're not going to go too into depth on that. But just in a quick nutshell, what we would use here is sedimentary rocks, which means they're kind of slabby. They've got two parallel sides, which means when you put one next to the other with about a 1-inch spacing in between, you get a crevice. So it's important, if you want it to look natural, to use a variety of sizes: large rocks, small rocks, right down to little slivers of rock. Again, a very important concept is that the crevices on average should be no wider than 1 inch. Anything wider than that, and you start to get away from, it becomes more of a planting pocket. And for some plants, that's fine, but other plants do require a crevice to grow as well as they can. And as you can see, we set the stones vertically, so we don't lie them flat like a paving stone. We set them vertically, or if you want a little extra drama, you can tilt them ever so slightly. So that's just a little, we're just touching on some design concepts there in these crevice gardens. But horticulturally speaking, not just aesthetic, they're not just pretty. They also are horticulturally correct, as I might say. This means, and one of the most important aspects of rock gardening is drainage, because rock garden plants hate to sit in sodden soil. They tend to rot. It's one of the reasons that you in the UK have alpine houses. There's a lot of that you need to grow under cover in the wintertime because they just can't handle that rain. But in the open garden, you can really mitigate that issue by building a crevice garden. And we have two different types of drainage going on. We have surface drainage. You'll notice this garden has a lot of slopes. So kind of like the roof of a house, when the rain hits it, it slopes, it sheets off the sides and immediately runs off the garden. Any water that isn't running off the garden is going directly through the crevices, because the types of soil we're growing these plants in is a very sandy, very airy, very well-drained kind of material. You have to rethink soils when you're rock gardening, because these plants do not want high nutrient soils. They want low nutrient rubbles and gravels and sands. So the crevice garden gives that perfect opportunity for that perfect drainage. It also creates a multitude of microclimates. You can see in this photograph, there's a north side, a south side. So you got your cacti and your heat-loving things on the south, and then just a few feet away, you can grow your saxifrages and your ramondas and the things that want to stay out of that baking heat, all in the space of just a few feet. You also see that there's a minimal soil surface area on these gardens. Any soil that's in between the big rocks is of course top dressed. So as the plants grow over the soil, their plant parts are sitting on rock. And of course the rock dries quickly, it heats up quickly, and it ripens the stems more quickly so that the plants are less susceptible to other types of pathogens like fungi, aphids, and all the other types of pests that we don't want with these gardens. Now, crevice gardens can come in many, many forms. They can be tiny, they can be teeny tiny. And this picture is by Chris Dixon, who's just outside here. He's one of the guys that's helping us work on the crevice garden here in Port Townsend. They can also be extremely large and placed in beautiful places, like next to a backyard swimming pool. You can grow, you can have, although it's more limiting, you can have a moist and shady crevice garden. Here you have some woodland saxifrages, dwarf hostas, these types of things that can work, cyclamen. There are plants, although you're more limited, there are plants that will grow in moist and shady conditions. If you want to grow the most things possible, moist and sunny is good. Here we have Gentiana acaulis, a classic rock garden plant. And this is where you're going to have the most potential in terms of having a diverse collection. And if you're in Denver, if you're in Kenton's area, you might go for the hot and the dry crevice garden. Here we feature a couple plants that you will never have to water once they are established in the crevices. And Mahuini popigii from South America and Astragalus angustifolius, two of my all-time favorites for the dry crevice garden. Now, whatever you grow and however you build your rock garden, it's very important from an aesthetic point of view that you create a sense of drama in the garden. Remember, we're emulating mountainous places. We're emulating extreme places. And so it's really important to not build a boring crevice garden. And so, from where I'm from is Vancouver Island, and just not too far from here are the prairies. Don't build a crevice garden that emulates a place like this. I know the prairies have their own type of drama, but really my backyard looks like this. And so maybe, you know, where you come from might influence the types of landscaping that you want to have outside your back door. And so that wraps up my section here. I just wanted to show you this last photo from my garden that features a little bit of drama. Primula marginata growing out of a vertical cliff. So thanks for having me, and I'm going to turn it over to Kenton now.
Thanks, Paul.
Yeah.
So Paul's just given you a rundown of the sort of history and the definitions, and in writing the book, we were kind of forced to define it to be, you know, we had no one gave us a badge of authority, but we had to just do it. Like, we had to define what a crevice garden is and put boundaries on it. And as soon as we did that, we realized, well, we're going to give boundaries, and then we have to explain how to break them, because that's what's so exciting for both of us these days, is what new avenues are out there and ways of innovating and changing. Because after all, you know, the Czech developments were revolutionary at the time. You know, so, you know, just kind of touching back to where these plants come from and why we torture them in crevices is, let's think about what their rhizosphere or root zone looks like in nature. And they don't know what humus is. They don't know what compost is. They might not even have experienced soil like the plant on the right. Its whole root system's literally a two-dimensional space, and there's nothing like dirt at all in that. They're literally, you know, like flat as paper growing in rock fissures. So you know, you've got to build a garden that emulates that. And a crevice garden, you know, in the garden situation, can give you an opportunity to use different soils, and it's all invisible from the top, which is really cool. You know, you're just seeing rocks and plants. You have no idea. There might be an acid soil under there. There might be a volcanic soil. There might be sand. There might be clay. You can really mix it up, and you can get complicated and do layered systems and whatnot, which we covered in the book. You know, that was one of our impetuses, is these new innovations needed to be documented and shared. But the layered soil thing is super cool, because plants can choose where they want their roots, and you can grow plants with separate soil needs right next to each other, which is super fun. But, you know, if this idea of the crevice seems foreign and only relegated to mountaintops or seacoasts, like most of us, our first crevice plant that we had access to was dandelions and cracks, right? That's Paul's picture, by the way. So building off of what Paul told you about, you know, this sort of mainstream, the definition of them, and you know, for the classic crevice garden, we have rules, but you know, like any good art form, as soon as you've learned the rules, let's start breaking them. And as we break the rules, we find more and more uses for crevice gardens. They don't have to be giant. They can be incredibly dramatic, even if they're small. A lot of folks are using them for those awkward corners of garden that are just weird, you know, like outside the back door or between the garage and the front door, these like strange, especially next to steps where there's a tiny grade change. Like, what the heck do you put in there? You know, hosta gets too big, you know, it's always, you're going to be brushing by it if it's oversized. So awkward places are a perfect place to situate a miniature crevice garden. And I think they can also replace retaining walls. I love this concept because, especially in cities where we're starting to think about, oh gosh, so much of the soil is under buildings and under parking lots now. Like when there's soil to be contained, do we need just another retaining wall, another man-made thing? Yeah, great, cool, awesome, more concrete. Well, I think a crevice garden is a super alternative to a retaining wall, isn't it? It could have been a brick wall, or it can be a plantable, porous, habitat-creating, pollinator-feeding garden, right? Love that solution. I love that. The one on top is Plant Delights Gardens, and it used to be just a steep dirt slope with a bunch of yew shrubs or something on top of it. It was pretty boring, so they ripped it out, put the crevice garden in. Where I am from, we are running out of water, which is part of climate change for much of the world. Some places are getting wetter, and we're getting drier in the most of the Western U.S. We're drying out, and if we're going to still have water to shower and to drink and to cook with, we have to give up water for our gardens. And it's always amazing to me. I'm going to dig on my own country for a second, but there's, you know, water rationing in the UK and whatnot, and yet We just don't have to do that as often in the States. We'd rather use it all up. We're just really not used to austerity, and we're not used to having to rein ourselves in. We just consume and consume. We've had so much wilderness to eat up for so long, we forget, but it's happening now. The water rationing, my side of the country has been on fire every summer, and now we get fires in the winter. Wonderful, great. And so our gardens are changing to reflect that. As water is getting expensive, xeriscape is being embraced, and xeriscape isn't just meaning gravel, nothing but gravel anymore. We're finally learning what gravel gardens are and using them. And when we've had to give up the fountains and we've had to give up grass in many places, a crevice garden is a beautiful feature that we can use in garden design now, since we're basically being deprived of more luxurious and wasteful things. So like where I'm from in Western Colorado, a lot of people just assume that a crevice garden is about dry gardening. Like that's its top use for us. So like I said, it gives us an opportunity to have something pretty when we can't be watering anymore. The last couple of things I want to mention of specific uses for crevice gardens. One is not a use as much as just an aspect of it, is that their maintenance is ridiculously low. Now, we'll be the first to admit that they're not easy to build and they might be expensive. It's an investment for sure. There are ways of getting around those problems, of course, but once you've built the thing and put the time in, they are remarkably little maintenance. I mean, nowadays I just use an electric leaf blower, and it's like my main maintenance task. It's like 20 seconds and I'm done, which is that's less than a dang lawnmower, isn't it? And it's no watering in most climates. It might be skilled maintenance, just knowing the difference between your plants and the few weeds that are still showing up in a crevice garden, which is another thing. Crevice gardens tend to have less weeds, like dramatically less, because of mineral soils, which we go into in the book. And but also there's a lot of weeds don't like that dried out surface. It really shuts the window on germination for things that blow in. And that's another thing, like they have to blow in because there's no other way to get there. So low maintenance is awesome. It's really cool. Lastly, and when I bring it up last, is it ties into the heart and soul of the place where we're staying right now, where they've kindly let us use their library to do this talk, at Far Reaches Conservancy here in Port Townsend, outside of Seattle. We built a crevice garden for them 3 years ago, and today we're finishing up on tripling the size of the dang thing. Kelly and Sue's interest in the crevice garden is as a way to grow and harbor rare and sometimes endangered plants. I mean, there are local examples, the Olympic Peninsula, which is an isolated mountain range with specific endemic plants, and they have nowhere to run. As climate change lifts the biome higher and higher, closer to the sky, they're running out of room. The hot waters are rising on them, and we're looking at a future where ex situ conservation is not the plan B; it's the only choice to save some species. So, and I think that's why a lot of botanic gardens are installing crevice gardens around the world, is to showcase their local rare and endangered plants, and sometimes saving seed, increasing seed libraries, etc. So everyone can have a hand in conservation there, which is really exciting. So that's the variety, right? Great deal of variety. Habitat thing, I'm only just beginning to really think about this, but it's blending in nicely with the pollinator movement that's really strong in the US and the UK. I think you guys are ahead of us on it. But I've noticed in my own crevice gardens, creatures that want it even drier than it normally is to burrow, and when we visited a lot of the old guys in the Czech Republic, that was where the lizards and the snakes, or remember the legless lizard, which was really cool. It's like a skink, but without legs. It kind of looks like a snake. Anyway, and the butterflies, even cold-blooded critters, the rock part, this rocky part of the garden gives them, it's another habitat. It's another diverse habitat in the garden. The pond delivers water to wildlife. The rock garden delivers heat and sun, dry forage, etc. And also it allows us to grow a variety of plants that might be specific to certain pollinators. So there's definitely an awesome habitat potential there. And I see crevice gardens as being one of those ways that cities can accommodate wildlife, just by increasing habitat for them. But if we're just going to allow ourselves our own, plant collecting, benders of collecting wacky plants, I've gone through many of them, like most of us rock gardeners, and one of them was I loved growing the difficult alpine miniature versions of weedy genera. So, knapweeds. I love these miniature knapweeds. They're never going to be weeds because they were so hard to grow in the first place. And we're plagued with bindweed in where I live. But here's a nice bindweed that's a rare alpine gem from Turkey. So whatever your funny tastes are, whatever your dreams, there's some group of plants and in miniature to be accommodated in the crevice garden. To get wackier and wackier, this is probably one of the most fluid cutting edges of crevice gardening right now is the material innovations. As I've learned from a few conferences we've been to, there are places on Earth where rock is either not cheap or not available. Like there are literally places where rock has to come in from thousands of miles, which that's going to eliminate. Most of us can't afford to haul that stuff. Like actually the gal from Russia was saying where she's from, there aren't rocks. What do you mean?
Rocks.
No rocks. I said, do they rock garden there? She's like, we would, but we don't have rocks. The few we could afford, we built the churches and buildings out of them. So this wonderful wild innovation comes to us from Peter Koren. His picture's here. You're looking at one shot from the Klinta Tradgard in Sweden, and I think the bottom one's in Copenhagen. What these are, this is a hybrid I never thought would happen, but it's so good. It's a roof crevice garden, right? Well, the tricks with roof gardens is that soil media is really heavy, so you have to engineer the building or you limit your plant selection. Well, they've got deep roots and it's insulated because it's styrofoam. That's freaking cool, right? That's hybrid vigor of an idea if there ever was one, right? So I'm excited to see where that goes, what new wacky materials are being used for it. And yet another innovation that I got to mention is comes to us from Denver Botanic Gardens. DBG boasts maybe 12 plus crevice gardens in the premises now, all over throughout all of their themed gardens. And this one's probably the most, shocking and spectacular is these obelisks in the heart of the steppe garden. DBG's mission these days is to really educate folks on what the steppe biome is, because we've all heard of the forest, we've all heard of the prairie, we've all heard of the tundra, we've heard of the beach, but what is the steppe? I mean, heck, we don't even have that word in English. It's a Russian word, steppe, right? So DBG's mission, really comes through with this artistic obelisk. And the big difference I want to point out with this is that this wasn't built on a mound of dirt. This is masonry that are mortared with wads of mortar back in there. So there's actually a cinder block structure on the inside of this thing. This is a built structure that clay was squished into and seed was added to get the chasmophyte plants in there, rather than kind of coming from the dirt side like Paul and I usually do. And that's cool. That's the first time I've seen that, and I'm excited to see home masons and hobbyists come up with some very cool. You grow ferns on walls upside down. Who knows what's going to happen with that? I can't wait. But to give you just a little more depth about the dry gardening thing and why it's so helpful to us, I was lucky enough to be hired for this public garden in the suburb of Arvada of Denver, and it's this garden, the Apex Crevice Garden. It's watered every 2 weeks, so it's got a little bit of water, but not much. And the maintenance on it is about 15 hours a year, which is super cool. That's where I learned that maintenance could be minimal. And that's for 1,000 square feet of rock, 3,000 square feet of garden. But what we learned in this garden is even in austere conditions, we were able to grow so many things really well, and also our natives even better and with low maintenance. So there's paintbrush back there. There's Moltkias from the Balkans. Learned a lot about crevice gardening from this big old public garden in Denver. And as far as I know, it's the first all public, all crevice, all xeric garden in Denver, which really, shout out to the Rocky Mountain chapter of NARGS, the North American Rock Garden Society, because their support was just critical for that. And Paul came down and helped me with it because, at the time, there's literally no one else on earth who knew how to set rocks that could help me out on that. But we've learned a bunch, and it's been so heartening just to watch this go. But it really I think it helped prove to us oh no, crevice gardening's got something for us in the dry American West. It really does. And we really thought we were cool when all of these holy grail plants from the Alpine journals, from the British history of growing exotic plants, when these really difficult plants were just easy in the American West. Might have just as much to do with our climate as the garden, but Petunia patagonica is just doing famously, blooming in that garden. We love it. And even for me, I'm literally an inch of precipitation short of the desert where I live. If it gets any drier, by definition, I will live in a desert. It used to be desert grassland. And despite all of that and how hot and dry it is, even my local natives that can be kind of difficult benefit from the crevice garden. And this claret cup down on the bottom left, even that guy in nature is almost always growing in crevices, not only because it loves it, but in a garden situation, it's a great way to lift the plant up and bring it closer to the viewer. So design standpoint is awesome for us. No matter the climate, there's a universal quality to it. But as Noel told us early on, what he was interested in is this new idea of using broken concrete. It's happening in places, I don't know, this use of exotic materials is really fun. I've got to mention our friend Lori Bull out of Portland, her book. She blogs as Danger Garden, and many people are familiar with her writing from there. But she, from her blog, I learned about folks doing crevice gardening in Portland. And she featured this little garden that I did, which was very much an afterthought in a guy's backyard, because he had these leftover horse troughs. It's a very American cowboy thing to have in your backyard. And he also had an old patio that needed breaking up, and it was going to be really hard to haul off that patio. So instead, we built him a bonus crevice garden in these horse troughs, and each trough has a different soil mix, so this man can collect and garden and grow different things in each. And I'm very excited about that because, and I don't think we've really plugged into it yet. I think this is really a cutting edge that's just going to happen tomorrow, is in like inner city places where people don't have access to rock or nature. I think crevice gardening levels the playing field, because anywhere that concrete is around, well, anywhere humans are around, there's concrete, right? And some of us joke that concrete is like human limestone, you know? And I love that. And that, of course, made us really discuss, like, oh, crevice gardening, it's still a crevice garden, even if it's not emulating nature and mountaintops and so forth. So that's fun to see where that goes. And in many ways, that's kind of out of our hands. I mean, Paul and I love to build these naturalistic rock gardens, and we're not in big city centers, right? But we've had a chance to build a few of them. Didn't build this one in Holland. Noel brought it up. These are the famous spheres in the rock garden that are made of paving slabs, just like your dad made them out of. And this really opened everybody's mind to the idea that it doesn't have to look like nature. But I would argue they look like planets, and planets are natural. That's cool. Anyway, this is them in winter. So in the dead of winter, they're pretty awesome. And in the summer, when they're in bloom, they're brilliant. Conversations that came out of this, I was visiting with the late, great Malcolm McGregor, an old friend of ours from Rock Gardening World in Yorkshire. He told me, he's like, Kenton, you should build some giant crevice cubes. You should build some cubes. I was like, Malcolm, probably not me. And I hope I honor him, because never say never. A couple years later, just the way things fell into place at a water demonstration garden outside of Denver, I built these cube ones, and that was someone's driveway. One of the staff at the city of Aurora was taking out his driveway. So we built these unwatered garden cubes, and these cubes allow you to lift the succulents that the hipsters are into, and really, show plants off, bring them closer to the nose. But really, the folks that have made the biggest splash in the pond is Plant Delights, or their attached Juniper Level Botanic in North Carolina. Not only did they really popularize and explode this idea of using broken concrete, but Jeremy, oh my God, that guy can build crevice gardens. There's not time to tell you what he's done. But one of the other things we learned about it is, in a humid climate like the Southeast US, it opened up the plant palette for them to grow Mediterraneans, basically. And they couldn't do that before, which is really cool. Some physics that I don't understand is allowing them to do that. And it was featured in the Washington Post, an article by Adrian Higgins. And as far as I know, that's the first time in a national non-gardening magazine the word crevice garden showed up. So that's really cool, and bringing crevice gardening to a climate that didn't have it before. My personal interest in it is crevice gardens versus meadows. And in many ways, as anyone knows who has a rock garden next to a meadow, they kind of don't like each other. They fight, and there's quite this tension. There's an invasion of plants problem and all. And I'm very fascinated by that, and I'm curious to develop that. So I think what I want to point out is there's so much potential out there that we're not done yet. There is amazing stuff that just hasn't been thought of yet. And we're just hoping that our book is the baton passed into the hands of people who are even more creative. And you don't have to be some strong, hulking person with muscles to move giant rocks. These 1 foot square troughs are brilliant, and everything still works. The rules, the plants, it's perfect. It could be approachable, and it can be small. You don't have to be the amazing Paul moving rocks. Like, this is a picture from him yesterday here at Far Reaches. While he was pushing big rocks around, I was messing around on the forklift trying to get the aerial picture before we left. And so that's what we're going to be returning to today. Photo courtesy of our buddy Chris here. He's on Instagram. But I guess I'll just wrap up with mentioning Far Reaches, I guess, plugging their good work, as they are sort of the hybrid of nursery and plant conservancy. It's folks like them. There's no one better to have a crevice garden and really leverage it, and that's why we're so honored to be down here and helping them out. That's all of our crew right now. There's Ty, and there's Chris and Paul on the left over there. That's what we'll be returning to right after this talk. So we want to thank you with that. And is there a minute to move the camera and show? We just discovered this.
Yeah, do it.
See the
Go
crevice
on.
garden.
Yes. Yeah.
So we're in a library above their packing shed because they're a mail order. So they pack boxes full of plants.
No, show us. It's great. Have a
We
line.
realized, let's see here. Where's the screen share ending thing?
Yeah, if you have to go end screen share.
Stop share. There we go.
That's it. Yeah.
We realized out the window, I'm able to see that. We're in the loft of this barn.
That's it.
There's the crevice garden we're working on right now.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah, there's only a few more tons of stone left for us to stack. But
40 tons in the last 3 days.
That was really fantastic. So exciting what you guys are doing. So exciting. And I tend to disagree with one thing you said about not having, you said, not having a badge of honor. Well, you do have a badge of honor, because about a year ago when we were talking to Paniotti Kaleides, and we said, so who's hot in the US? Who do we need to have on Garden Masterclass? And your names are right at the top of the list. So I think you do have badges of honor, actually. I think you do. And I think I have to say, well, the book, I've held it up a few times, but people who are members of Garden Masterclass, you can go to the members page and the retail and go to Filbert Press, which is Anna Mumford's company, and you can get a book there. But I particularly like, and you touched on the small, what is it you call go small. Yeah. Which I think is great, because I think, we saw during COVID, we saw the sort of the houseplant thing take off. And I think now, if people kind of cut their teeth and get a bit of, confidence with houseplants, maybe this is the next thing where they just, nudge outside onto the balcony or onto the
and there's so much you can do in a small space. I mean, that's like some of the stuff that Harry Jans is doing in Holland. I mean, really just packing in so much on the vertical. And I would just love to get some architects inspired by this. Imagine what you can do in urban environments. Packing amazing levels of biodiversity. But on one slightly skeptical point, having spent most of my life gardening in the west of England, where you have it's an incredibly weed-friendly climate. I mean, long growing season, year-round, potentially year-round rainfall. The ability of grasses, in particular, to seed into anywhere that people from the southeast just don't understand, and the ability of grasses and certain other weeds to grow in, without any obvious soil. How much experience have you got of managing or seeing crevice gardens managed in a comparable climate in the US or Canada?
Question. Actually, one of the first solutions, one of our mentors, Alan Furness, who's is he in Northumberland? I think he's a great rock gardener. He uses around the edges of his crevice garden to keep plants from coming in from the lawn. He uses a deep gravel system, which is very Beth Chatto of him,
Yeah.
But also just using very, very lean materials. I think there's a sweet spot in every climate to go really mineral so there's no organic material, or dry enough that you don't exclude your plants, but you can at least minimize the weeds.
Yeah, yeah.
And for me, that's easy to do because we're near desert, and it doesn't take much, and my own plants are upset. But
But
Keep
then
in mind
Paul,
also that the
Paul, your
rock,
climate, I mean your climate,
Yeah.
Paul, in the western on Victoria. I mean, it's not
That must be
far off.
pretty, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty temperate.
it's a pretty
No,
weedy place, that's for
dripping,
sure. Yeah. But
Yeah.
you'd be amazed at just how kind of weed-free these gardens can remain. Because keep in mind, if you've got a kind of a 10 centimeter wide rock and then a 1 inch
Mhm.
soil in between,
the square footage
mixing
is
next
just
to
down.
there.
Mhm.
The square footage of what's a medium that a weed can get into is minimal to begin with, right?
Mhm.
Add the plants on top of that, and then you're top dressing the soil with gravels and things. It's really not a weed friendly kind of a situation.
No.
Yeah.
'Cause the old rock gardens, the kind of 1920s, 1930s in Britain, I mean, you often come across them in, gardens open to the Yellow Book or something, and they're nearly always there's a few overgrown dwarf conifers,
Right.
and otherwise kind of completely choked with stuff. I mean, they are extraordinarily difficult to weed, and they are exposing a lot more soil surface, weren't they?
Yeah. I mean,
That-
do keep in mind the difference between an annual weed and a perennial weed, right?
There's
We're
Yeah.
kind of talking annuals here. If the perennials get in, and the perennials this is why in any type of rock gardening, it's absolutely essential to get any perennial roots and rhizomes out of that garden before any pot goes in.
Sure. If there's a weak spot to crevice gardening, it's perennial deep rhizomed weeds.
Mhm.
You've
Yes,
got to
yeah.
clear those out to protect them. Yeah, terrifying.
But we've found that, it's just that extra attention to detail at the beginning, right? Keeping anything that might be close to the garden, barriered from those weeds to be able to get in. And it's really, with some forethought, it has not actually been an issue for us.
Yeah.
And what about spreading the seasonal interest? Because of course, you think of alpines and you think of the early part of the year being the sort of the height of the flowering season. But I mean, if you're trying to encourage people and get a little bit more interest later in the year, what's your advice for that?
Man, actually, it's almost built in. That's a super good question, because traditional alpines tend to fire off and they're gone, which we noticed about rock gardens. But as Paul pointed out, a lot of our rock garden plants are not all alpine. A lot of them are Mediterranean. Many of them are steppe. Some are from summer rain climates and bloom in the summer. And that immediately just opens up, the season-long flowering.
Yeah.
And so, at least in my garden, and it's not really big, our backyard garden, there is something blooming from late March on. Totally into November easily.
I just built a garden in a subsection of one of our hort center's garden in the winter garden, and so we're specifically looking to make a rock garden with winter interest, right? So a lot of these buns are evergreen for one thing.
Yeah,
and so look, that's what I mean when they say they pay the rent 12 months of the year, right?
Yeah.
Dwarf conifers, for me, dwarf conifers are also crucial for keeping that year-round interest. So dwarf conifers, evergreens, and the flowering parts in the spring, that's just kind of like the icing on the cake, it's a little extra bonus kind of thing. But there's no question that you can have it looking beautiful all year round.
And a lot of that foliage, the different foliage, has amazing textural interest, doesn't it? So you can get a really gorgeous spread of varieties of texture, can't you? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So form and shape are a big deal. I think there's a lot of folks are just attracted to the bun form. You could have a whole collection of every plant's a different genera, but they're all buns and they're all pushing.
Yeah. We've got a question from Marcus de la Fleur, who's over in Chicago, who said, have you ever visited the in situ rock garden in the Garmisch-Partenkirchen in the German Alps? Satellite garden of the Munich Botanical.
We've both been there. I volunteered there for a week.
Oh, right.
Really?
Great.
Yeah. That place is amazing. I think that might be my favorite public garden on earth.
Oh, really?
No, I'm dead serious. That's a magical place. I've never been to a botanic that you have to walk a day from a town to get to. It's oh my God, amazing. Yeah.
And now it was a question from Wendy, who's in the South Carolina Low Country, where there ain't no rock, but lots and lots of oyster shells.
She dines on oysters every night. I know she does. Yeah.
That's great. That's like us here in Western North America too. There's oysters growing just not too far from us. Right?
I actually saw some in the soil media that we're putting under the garden right now. Some little pieces.
Was there a question about oyster shells as a soil amendment? Or
I
anything?
think that it's simply, can you make a crevice garden with oyster shells? Is kind of what she would like to ask, but I shouldn't actually ask that because she thought it was perhaps a little bit.
Sure.
And
it's like the middens.
Well, yeah, or in a miniature crevice garden in a
Yeah.
pot or a planter. That is very interesting.
That's
I
fun.
think I might
Go for it, Wendy. Go for it.
challenge.
South Carolina crevice
Get it.
garden.
Yeah,
Yeah.
do it before these guys steal your
hard.
idea.
Just to throw some fun ideas out there, architectural glass. It's been said by a couple people.
Oh
Haven't
gosh,
done yet.
yes,
With these
yes,
thick slabs of glass.
yes,
Freaking
yes.
expensive.
Yeah, don't tell Reginald Ferrer.
Oh, he would die. He would die again. If he
Yeah.
yeah.
Wendy wants to know a good source for crevice plants. Which,
Oh golly, it depends where you are.
Yeah.
We've been talking about this a lot because the generation that gave us the last several decades of alpine and rock garden plants, many of them are retiring or dying
yeah,
off.
yeah,
Which is
yeah.
really sad. Like
Yeah.
and
There's a void to be filled.
yeah,
there.
and it's terrifying. But at the same time, there's a long culture in rock gardening to grow your own plants from seed.
Mhm.
It's
Yes,
very
yes.
established.
And we've
many
got the American Rock Garden Society Seed Exchange.
right,
which
yeah.
is a very good
There's many
seed
places
exchange.
on earth there are no sources, so home gardeners in clubs
Yeah.
grow in their backyards and share with each other.
So
Yes,
joining
yes.
a
That's
club,
normal. That's
join-
completely normal.
joining a rock garden club is really one of the best ways to do it, and learn
Mhm.
how to propagate. Right.
Mhm.
A lot of these,
Yeah,
a lot of these
yeah.
plants are actually not that difficult to propagate. They don't take a lot of space.
Some are in the
And-
grocery store.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Louisias are in the
Yeah,
grocery
it's
store
true.
now. It's
But if
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
connect with community, like so much horticulture is about community, right? And so if you can connect with a community of people, then you've got the opportunity to share plants,
Yeah,
share information, learn how to grow these things, and it adds a whole new level of everything to it because it's more fun to grow your own plants. If you've grown it
Mhm.
from seed, it's not something that someone else has done the hard work. It's there, it is in your garden.
And for a beginner though, or actually to specifically answer a question, there is often a question there is a registry or sort of a list in the back of the book of
Mhm.
present mail order or retail sources of rock garden plants. Actually, you
And,
guys
and Marcus is asking, have you ever used prairie bluff species from the Great Plains in crevice gardens?
oh yes. Actually, that's the thing that I'm hot for right now is little liatris or things that are small plants. They look like rock garden plants, but what they really are is the plant that shows up in the spring after either snow or wind or tornadoes or something has knocked down all of the forbs. And I find that very interesting. A forb habitat, the tall herbaceous plants from those areas that
Mm-hmm.
come up before the tall things do. Yeah, they're and there's
So
more
early season stuff.
Yeah,
Mm,
there's
yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
It would be really nice to hear a couple of words from your esteemed publisher, Anna. Would you just
Yes,
like to say hello?
Come on,
You're-
esteemed publisher.
You're sitting there with a great big smile, like you're proud as punch, I'm sure. But
I am. I think I'm the proudest publisher alive, probably, with these
Yeah,
designs.
what a
They're
great-
just so full of great ideas all the time. I mean, there's even more today that they showed us that isn't in the book. I'm thinking about the next one.
book number 2.
Yeah.
When the idea was mooted, how long did it take you to decide, this was one to go with?
10 minutes, I would say. Yeah. It just had great book written all over it.
Yeah.
That's- Yeah.
No,
that's how it was
definitely.
really.
Yeah.
I love the idea of crevice gardens in awkward places. That's such a really
Yeah, no, I think that could be so important, so
Yeah.
important. Yeah.
Problem solvers, not just, oh, this is a novel idea. Where do I stick it?
Yeah.
I have a novel problem. How can I solve it? We love
Yeah.
that,
And you guys were saying, join, it would be great to, learn how to propagate and join a alpine society, rock garden society. In the States, are young people joining those sort of groups? Because
Really are.
they are. That's great. I mean, here in the UK, I think, I think it will take a little bit of, something to get the younger gardeners to pitch up and to join these groups.
And you see, we've had a huge growth in young people growing houseplants, which is, I think that's been one of the kind of really interesting things over the last sort of 5 or so years, and not something we've not actually covered on Garden Masterclass note dear business partner. But I think, as you say, I think you did imply earlier that perhaps this is the next thing on. Once you're looking outside the window, you have a little garden, and it is a little garden. How many plants can you pack into a small space? Well, with crevice gardening, a hell of a lot.
Yeah. Julia Cordons very kindly said Aberconway nurseries and societies are in the UK, and the Scottish Rock Gardening Club. So she's put the details up on that, and the Alpine Garden Society. So yeah, that's great. And we do have young people. I think you're saying, Julie, we do have young people coming to the Scottish Rock Garden Society. That's great. That's great. Really
That's
exciting.
great. Yes.
I mean, as far as rock
I
gardening,
remember years and years ago, a long time ago, I was for only about a year or so involved with the Bristol branch of the Alpine Garden Society. And I can't remember how I met him, but I met this young chap who was sort of, kind of 18, 19, who was seriously into trilliums and really quite choice plants, but he was also really into heavy metal. And I remember bringing him along to an AGS meeting, and he had really long hair, leather jacket with this kind of Iron Maiden, AC/DC, all this kind of stuff. I mean, he dressed up for heavy metal. I mean, it's just wonderful combination.
Crevice clothing.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd like to meet him.
There you go, guys. Bits of jewellery with crevice gardening in them. But I think,
yes.
Actually, I think
crevice gardening with live plants on the jewellery.
Yeah, there we go. No, I think
let's merchandise it.
I know. In fact, I think it's probably more people of our generation and slightly younger that need to be persuaded to go. I think you're right, guys. I think the younger gardeners and in this country and in the States and getting into propagation, I think it's probably people of our generation who might just sort of think, alpine plants, what about them? But I think you're going to shake the world, you two, I think.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do when it comes to young people with the modern world we live in, and there's a limited time and there's limited space, right?
Yeah.
Property's expensive. People may only have a balcony, right? And so this is something you can do with limited time and limited space.
Absolutely.
It's a perfect little fit, I would
and
say.
I also think because you have so perfectly and really explicitly shown how to do it, if people do it correctly when they form the garden, then like you say, the maintenance is so low, then it's a win-win. It's not something that they've got to be nervous about leaving or having to learn a whole new sort of regime of garden maintenance. So if they get it right at the beginning, it's absolutely destined for success. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well,
See, like I came to gardening through houseplants, actually.
right.
When I learned, you can plant plants outside, hit the ground. Oh my gosh, that's my life story. But like we've met a number of younger people who came to gardening from crevice gardens.
Oh, right.
Which I thought was really interesting. Like that was actually the gateway.
Yeah.
I really couldn't fathom that. Like rock gardening, when I think it was kind of intimidating for me to get into. There's all these plant names to learn. It's very botanical, very scientific.
Yeah.
It seemed intimidating, except the people in rock gardening were so welcoming, which is I think that's essential. Is how open are you to the guy with the Iron Maiden shirt? So like Mike Bone at Denver Botanic Gardens is a biker, and he's got tattooed sleeves and a big red beard. Like I like that there can actually genuinely be an inclusivity element.
Definitely.
Yes.
Definitely.
Which is wonderful.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping to be out in Seattle in October, so I'd like to try and get to Far Reaches Conservancy and have a look at what you've done. That would be really good.
It's a quick ferry ride. It's worth
Great.
it.
Ferry ride. How exciting. Oh my goodness.
Oh gosh, yes.
Well, listen, it's been fantastic, you two. So we're so lucky to have you in the same place at the same time too. Because
we've not had that much before, have we? I mean, people being in the same room. We've all been so isolated from each other. Great.
Yeah. But no, I cannot, recommend this highly enough. It's absolutely brilliant, and it's so comprehensive as well. And I also just want to say I love the bit in the back where you have the sort of learning from, what do you call it, case studies, lessons from the best. I think that's really lovely, the way you've sort of highlighted, I suppose, a few of your gardening heroes, I guess. But no, great. Well done. Well done.
Thank you. Fantastic. Thank you.
Huge success with it. And thank you very much. We must get you to do a webinar on the we
must actually, I mean, something maybe for the autumn or winter.
Or a live workshop.
Yeah.
That could be cool. I mean, if you're into video, just sort of setting up a camera.
Oh, videos, Noel. Let's
That
just
still
go
needs
over to
done,
the
really.
state.
Yeah.
That still needs done.
You can do it when you go over then in October.
Let's get over there.
Yeah.
We're
Brilliant.
totally honored to be on Gardening Masterclass.
Oh, lovely. Well, it's great to have you, and good luck, and take care of those backs, you two.
Yes, yeah,
Will do.
sure. Yes,
You will.
Amen.
Yeah. Thanks so much, you guys.
All right, it's been
Yes,
lovely.
thanks ever so
Have a
much.
good
All the
day.
best. Yeah.
Yeah, all the best.
Everybody.
Bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.